Welcome, viewers and listeners, to another British Business Podcast series. Today, we're in the iconic Headland Hotel. This morning, I'm delighted to be joined by Joe Healey from Healeys Farm. Welcome, and we're in for a treat. I say that on most occasions, but today I know because of some of the background that we're going to talk about. So, Joe, welcome.
Thank you.
And thank you for coming in.
Pleasure.
So could you just start by giving us a journey into who you are and what you've done and where you're at now in terms of business life?
Yeah, so I'm a seventh generation Cornishman, and the family go back a long way, and a lot of people will have heard of the Austin Healey sports car.
Okay.
So that was my great grandfather, Donald Healey, invented the car and went on to rallying fame. So we've kind of got it a little bit in our blood, a little bit of the entrepreneurship. So Dad founded our current business in 1980, and there's a long and complicated story with that, but it basically evolved a off-license, taking some labels off a bottle of cider, putting a Cornish label on the cider and reselling it as a Cornish cider, and finding that one sold more than the previous version. So from there, he took it into his own hands to start making his own. And we moved to our current farm, where I was 2 weeks old at the time, so my bedroom was the top drawer. There was no electricity, there was no running water, it was bought from the receivers, there was no roofs on the barns. But the next day, Dad went down into one of the fields and started planting some apple trees, and established the first kind of commercial orchard in Cornwall. And one of the key things with that location was it's right on the A3075, which you won't know it. It's basically the busiest Cornish tourism road that there is in Cornwall. So we had direct access off that. So we had a huge passing traffic. And people started to come up to see where this cider is being made, and Dad started offering sort of guided tours, and that kind of evolved what is now a really big tourist destination.
How long ago was that?
So we moved there in 1986, and really it was just constantly from day one the doors were open. And first they installed a farm shop, so there was sort of cellar door sales, if you like. Then when the queues started getting a bit big for that, they converted one of the barns into a bit of a restaurant so that people could get some food. Tractor ride would go around through the orchards, and always integrating the kind of visit. So our manufacturing, in effect, is our new theme park ride. So the people could come, they could see where it's made, they could taste the product, they could buy the product, and they could have a cream tea with the family. And in kind of 2000, year 2000, we did a bigger project where we actually installed the first distillery in Cornwall, and built some underground cellars where we would store the brandy and now whiskey. And that kind of gave us then the complete tour route, so we could actually start charging for a guided tour. So there was a cider making museum where, as we were going around various apple growers, we would see sort of in the corner a press or a mill or something, and say, "Oh, what are you doing with that one?" And the farmer would say, "Well, give us a flagon and you can have it," sort of thing. So we sort of collected all these items and actually made a really nice and authentic cider museum, which then ended with our distillery and cellars and then a new farm shop. And that was kind of the step change for the tourism model. And obviously in the background, we were still obviously making all of the cider and selling the cider. But very much marketed to what we would describe as the bucket and spade market. So Cornwall is kind of famous for our long, golden, sandy beaches.
Yep.
And people come here for that. So actually it's, the kids go play on the beach all day long. And at the end of their holiday, they'll pick up a flagon of our cider as a bit of a gift. So it's a gift market product. And that was great. And I was always involved as a youngster. We had farm animals, which was an important part of the day out. And so, my brother and I would be mucking out the farm animals at sort of 6-7 years old. We would go down to the orchards and we would pick some apples, and we would offer a service to our customers where we would slice the apples for them. And a small apple was 2p, a medium was 5p, and a big one was 10p. But the problem we had was, and we had a little a log, so our little accountancy log. But the problem we had was that we thought the big copper penny, or 2p, was more expensive, more value than the small little 5p. So we didn't quite get our accounting right at that stage, but we were only 6 years old at the time.
Wow!
But it was brilliant, and I remember ITV came out and they wanted to do a piece about the farm, and they saw my brother and I on our little stall doing our little operation, and actually the whole piece became focused around us because just we were two young kids. It was great fun. But that was kind of our first, like, that's just kind of what we're like. We kind of, you know, see an opportunity, and Dad is great. You know, he's a classic entrepreneur, and he obviously could sort of sense that and sort of encouraged, but, you know, gently. So we started doing that, and then every summer we would kind of be working on farm. We would do our own little thing, and Sam started to become more focused on the kind of engineering and a bit more in manufacturing, and I was sort of a natural kind of sales and marketing and brand development. And then when we turned 18, it was an interesting one because we were living on a cider farm, which should be pretty cool. But actually all of the stuff that we were making at the time was this gift bucket and spade Cornish scrumpy flagon, which, to be honest with you, is not something you're going to drink a pint of in a pub. So I said to Dad, look, we live on a cider farm. Can we make...
How old were you when...
So this is 18.
You're 18 and you went
18.
to Dad.
Yeah, I went to Dad and said, look, we need something that we can actually enjoy as an
long in the
18-year-old.
tooth entrepreneur who's done all the business in the past.
Yeah.
An 18-year-old whippersnapper. Okay.
Exactly.
Okay.
So he turned around and he said, well, that's a good idea. Go on then.
Wow.
So that was then the start of what is now the Rattler brand. So Rattler, the name comes from a local variety of apple grown in Truro. And the apples from the Rattler apple tree, if once they're ripe, you pick them up and you shake them, and the pips would be loose, so you actually get a little rattle to the name. And obviously, Rattler is a great name for a cider. So, no real market research other than gut instinct that every other cider on the market is mass-produced, it's filtered, so it's clear, it's carbonated, it's 4.5%. They all taste the same.
I've won some money, by the way, because we were talking earlier about the name and where it would come from, and I said that it would be something other than, because we were talking about snake bite. But it's a great sort of where does it come from? So
the
thank you.
The name came first, and then the snake icon came a few iterations later, just to kind of play on the name.
Okay.
But yeah, so the product itself is, you know, it was initially set out to be purposely different because why would we can't compete on price? No. Nowhere near on price. So we don't even want to go there. So we initially set out at 6.5%, and it was going to be a cloudy product. So to actually make the product cloudy, it sounds simple, but actually for the big boys who rely on sterile filtration, you can't obviously then have a cloudy product because you would filter out all of the cloud. So the method that we have, which basically relied on old school pasteurization, allowed us to have this cloudy product, 6.5%. The name Rattler. The first versions were you know, again, this was kind of, you know, just going as we were making up as we were going along. So we had Cloudy Rattler, and we had the same two boys. So we've got these two boys, Denzel and George, that are the characters on our Cornish Scrumpy brand. We put them on this pump clip, and it just looked ridiculous. But I then took some mini kegs to local pubs, and sort of, I remember knocking on the door and getting thrown out of one pub because they were saying, "We're tied to Snostal Brewery." So, you know, lots of quick lessons being learned about, you know, sort of sales. And then started getting some samples, and people just said, "This is delicious." So they started trialing it. And that summer we trialed it in about 10 or 12 pubs, all of which were Snostal Brewery pubs. And it was on a hand pull. And that went okay. At the end of the season, though, the brewery basically sat down with us and said, look, unfortunately, it's not going to work for us. We've got contracts which basically give exclusivity to the likes of Strongbow within our state. So, you know, we're breach of our contract, can't do it. So I went off on a ski season and had a bit of fun, worked in a bar. I was out away for four months, came back and I was like, right, Dad, what about this brand again? Snostal don't want to do it, that's fine. What about Sharps or Skinners or I don't know, let's work it out. So he said, yeah, fine, go on in. And then the next day, you know, I kid you not, the next day, the head brewer, a chap called Roger Ryman, called us up from the brewery and he said they just had a tenants meeting and they were all asking where this Cornish cider's gone. They've had a look at their clauses in their contract and they think there might be a workaround. Interesting.
So they called you?
Yeah, so they called us, which was great. So that was then when we said, okay, let's give it another go, but let's actually look at some proper branding. So we actually went to a branding agency at the time and an agency as a lady, a contact through a contact, and she just came up with some sketches and started using a snake. And we sort of thought, well, that's interesting, just because you get that instant recognition. It kind of works with the name. And she had one version which I remember it was a snake wrapped around an apple, and he was coming up and he was looking at you, but it was quite fierce. I was like, no, there's something in there, but it's not right, because this isn't a fierce product. This is a fun product. This is made in Cornwall. We are laid back. We are we actually like to play on the stereotype that the Cornish have of being very directly and being very laid back. So like, right, put a pair of sunglasses on him, make him smile. Like, he's got to be having fun, because at the end of the day, that is what this brand needs to stand for. Having fun, not taking itself too seriously, being bloody good, knowing that actually our product is going to be the best tasting cider on that bar, but actually having a point of difference. And it's funny, even today, you go into a bar and tourists will come down and they'll see, we've developed now our, the actual tap handle itself into this character. And people that don't know it will be like, what the hell is it? They'll have a little giggle, this silly Cornish, they're off on it again. And then they'll try it. And the most important thing is they then love it and they go back for their second pint and their third pint. And of course, if you do know it, instantly you've got this recognition.
Sure.
Oh, great, I'll have one.
Yep.
So the power of it was really interesting which came first. The product came first, and the product was different and it was delicious. But then actually the branding, without doubt, is what then opened people's eyes, caught people's attention, did all the things that a brand should do, backed up by a really good product. And the two things went hand in hand. I then went to university, went to Bath University, did business administration, which was a really interesting course, because it's a 4-year course with 2 6-month sandwiches. And the first one, because everything was going so well at the farm, in keg, so in pubs only, there was a huge opportunity to get it in bottles and to start selling that thing to supermarkets. So for the first 6 months or 9 months, I came back to the farm, and that was kind of the project of bringing a bottle version out, getting it into Tesco's, Sainsbury's, Morrison's regionally, and achieved all those things in that 9 months. Then went back to university, and I then had the second 6 months, which was really interesting. So I actually contacted Cider Brewery, who were our biggest customer at the time, partner, distributor, and spoke to the sales director, and he said, look, just come work for us. I don't know what that's going to look like, but come work with us. So I did, and I spent the first 3 months shadowing different parts of the business, from their managed houses to their tenancies, then to their free trade. And so free trade is all the pubs up and down the county, the region that aren't tied. So they can choose where they can buy their product from, whether it be Snostal or Molson Coors or whoever. So that was absolute cutthroat kind of sales. I've got Carlsberg, you've got Carlsberg, who's cheapest?
Sure.
Or who's got the best service, and all those other things that you try and put forward. But obviously within my portfolio at St Auster Brewery was Rattler. So that, it's obviously what kind of happened next. I had 200 odd pubs, and I think by the end of my 6 months, 130 were stocking it. And obviously I was able to work with that sales team, and really be part of their team, a genuine part of their team, but actually at the same time. How
long ago was that? When you went there and you got it to 130, did you say?
Yeah.
How long ago was that?
So that was my third year of uni, which is amazing how long ago that was. It's probably 2008. I suppose 2008, 2009. Okay. So
14 years ago.
Yeah. And that was great. That's when it really started rocketing in the on-trade. And when I was at university, I was always, all my projects were around like rebranding exercises or experiential marketing at the farm, and doing all of these things. It's like a live case study, and the university loved it. So finished university, and I was then, I was always going to join the farm, but Dad said to, he didn't say you weren't allowed to before you're 25, but he really encouraged us to do something else until at least 25. And I was really keen to do something else, because I didn't want to just do the farm. I had to learn elsewhere. So applied to the Coca-Cola graduate program, and was successful. So had then 3 years of sales, marketing, account management, finishing at 2012 Olympics as a venue manager of the Olympic Stadium, which was incredible experience, but it gave me the grounding on sales, marketing, account management, people management, a lot of formal training, which was really interesting to see, and I can see the pros and cons of both approaches.
Where was that?
I was all around. So I started in Bristol, then went to London for the last 2 years, and then then I came back home.
Okay.
And so we joined the business in 2012 as commercial director, and basically started growing the business. We had a big project in 2014-15, which was £3 million. So that the model prior to that was we would make everything on site, but the capital intensive part of the process is the actual, the machines to package it.
Yeah.
So we just outsourced that. So we'd make it, we'd then send it to brothers who bottled it, or actually Cider Brewery kegged it, which was a really good partnership because they had kegs they weren't using, they had a kegging line they weren't using, they had pubs they could distribute it to. We eventually outgrew that line, so we actually went to Brains Brewery, so they kegged it. But basically over the course of the next sort of 5 or 6 years, the way we did it was great because we built up a base level of volume, and you could clearly see the co-packing charges, the distribution charges, getting it up, getting it back, the warehouse charges. So you can very easily work out your paybacks on bringing that stuff back in-house. So we then invested in the bottling line, we then invested in the keg line, and now everything is now back under one roof. So we've got complete control over, what we're making, when we're making it, the way we're making it, the quality, all of those things are back in house, which is brilliant.
Can I stop you for a second? And I don't want to, because this is amazing. The team that you're part of, your commercial director, can you just explain? There will be people out there, and lots of people will understand what commercial director does. But in your specific area of expertise, what does commercial director mean? What are you covering? What are you looking after? What are your areas? But also, what's the team? Would the board look like? I'm guessing you're on the board as a commercial director.
Well, yes, and that's evolved over time. So currently, I'm managing director. So I was commercial director up until probably 3 years ago. So commercial director, basically my role was to maximise any sales opportunity. I was in charge of all the commercials in terms of pricing, margin maintenance, margin management,
contracts.
Yeah, exactly. And then the direct team I would have had, there's in fact 2 parts of the business. So I would have had the external sales part of the business. And as that grew, it's a very small, there was maybe 5 people in that team. I initially dealt hands-on with all of the key customers, all of the supermarkets, all of the Cider breweries and the Molson Coors of this world, within a team who kind of did a lot of the kind of admin associated with that. But actually we had a girl joined us after university. She was at Bristol University, and she's just brilliant. So kind of worked with her from the outset, and she is now our head of sales. So she has all direct contact now with all of our key customers. And then under her, we've now got a team of national account salesmen, with then the sort of regional salespeople underneath that. Marketing falls under that remit. So brand development, product development, listening to customers, getting feedback on opportunities. We're small, we're nimble, and actually we've got some really capable people that can kind of react quickly and take opportunities, which is really exciting. We always like to try and be first. Like we made England's first ever whiskey. So we have the oldest English whiskey, which seems bizarre because Scotland have been doing it for a long time. But in our cellars is England's oldest whiskey, which is cool. I think that what we did with the Rattler brand was novel, and it was different, and it was innovative. And since people have copied and tried to copy, which is always a pat on the back, really.
Yes.
And within that commercial, I'm thinking back then, so the finance would come into me as well. So we had head of finance or finance director, I think it was at the time, people, HR. So it was kind of a broad commercial remit.
Yeah.
And as that's now evolved into managing director, obviously that basically includes the whole operational side of the business as well. So the actual, the nitty gritty, the day to day of making it, the stuff you have to do, maintenance, contracts, scheduling, building repairs before the thunderstorms come. You make sure the gutters are checked. There's a lot of so managing director does the whole thing. And then we've got a board, which is really good. We've got some non-exec directors, which have got a lot more kind of structure, governance, background and experience, because we are, dad is entrepreneur. And he'll be the first to admit that. I've got a bit of corporate from Coke. My brother not so much. So having Brian as non-exec is really useful. Completely impartial, non-emotional, because again, family members can sometimes get a bit emotional. So trying to keep it sort of on the straight and narrow is really important.
It's nothing like passion, right?
Well, exactly. And at the end of the day, we're all trying to achieve the same thing.
Absolutely.
And we all know that, which is great. So, it's just sometimes we might vary on how's best to get there. But yeah.
Amazing. So how many staff do you have right now?
So if you ask today, I think we're about 170, 180.
Okay.
But with that, interestingly, we only 2 months ago acquired a off-site, basically it's a pub, but it's a substantial pub down in Falmouth, which had in it 50 members of staff. So take that out, and the core business is kind of 120, and that'll peak at sort of 130, 140 in the summer when the tourism side of the business is fully staffed.
Turnover of the business in
16
million?
Yeah.
Okay.
And that grew, we were consistently growing pre-pandemic. So obviously the pandemic for us, it was interesting because we're quite a diverse business. So we had a visitor centre which obviously had to close. We supply 1,000 pubs which obviously had to close. So all of that stopped. But we also supply supermarkets that didn't close, and actually everybody wanted to drink. So our supermarket sales absolutely skyrocketed, as did our mail orders. Which I know, mail orders. But it's one of those things that actually, like, we just launched a new website and we just sorted out, and fortunately we did all of that just at the right time, because overnight, it went from something that trickled over to an absolute game changer, to the extent that we had to unfurlough people. Interesting, I just flashbacks. The first few weeks we got a distillery on site, and obviously there was a desperate need for hand sanitizer. So within 10 days, I think, of the first lockdown, we'd worked with the local hospital on the WHO recipe, in effect, for hand sanitizer, and we basically started using our cider, because the other initial concern is we're going to have a load of cider left over, because cider's not like beer. You don't make cider all through the year, so you make it when the apples are ready, and then you deplete stock through the year. But hang on a minute, 1,000 pubs have just shut on one site, so we're going to have cider left over. What are we going to do with it? So actually we thought we had surplus cider, we had a facility that could create what is an absolute in-demand product. And actually, we did it free of charge, because it was, those early days of the pandemic were very scary for everybody. So we went through this absolute roller coaster of furloughing staff, of then unfurloughing staff because our online orders were booming, because supermarkets were booming. So we continued to manufacture. We were permitted, was food manufacturing. And then obviously we unfurloughed staff purely to run the distillery 24/7, so that we could create bulk hand sanitizer to deliver to the local hospital. And it's funny, Cornwall's a small place, and I've been fortunate. I've had a couple of children in the last couple of years, and it's one of those, when you get to the delivery suite and all of the nurses and all of the midwives put two and two together. Healey, and are you from Healey Cider? Yes. We had your hand sanitizer, and we were walking around, and because obviously it smelt like basically brandy. And it was basically high strength gin in effect. And they were walking around with this beautiful, and they all said about it, and they were all thanking us, and we were like, no, you're doing this amazing thing for us right now, so thank you. And it was one of those really lovely moments that you get in Cornwall.
What's happened with that since?
Stopped.
Completely stopped.
Yeah.
When did it stop?
Probably 3 months after it started. So the likes of Ineos and the big boys kind of turned on these mass hand sanitizer production units and flooded the market. So perfect. And that's exactly what, we had no intention of it becoming a thing. We didn't want it to be a thing.
Sure.
But we could, and it felt like the right thing to do at the time, and absolutely, and we would do it again, 100%.
Sure. Did you try to market the fact that you did that, or was this was just a necessity that you were trying to? Yeah,
it's one of those things that one thing led to another. So we didn't, no, but the Spotlight News got wind of it, so they actually wanted us to do I was in the distillery on my iPhone, selfie filming myself, because obviously they couldn't come and bring a film crew.
Yeah.
And then I would send in this video, and then the Spotlight News was about this local distillery that's making hand sanitizer. It was literally me and my selfie and my video. So we didn't market it, but indirectly we did.
Yeah, of course.
And actually that created so much like stress for the team, because actually a couple of the girls that did come into the office were fielding phone calls of absolute desperation, all day, every day, pleading for hand sanitizer. And it's one of those things that we had such a limited supply. We had to prioritize the hospital. Wow. So for them, the personal journey that they had to go through was pretty intense. They were in tears, every day. So it was a really challenging time.
That feels like a chapter in a book. That time for the hand sanitizer bit is a chapter that actually at the beginning, and you did it, and then 3 months, and then you went on unsuspecting marketing, and then the girls are going, what have you done here? Wow. It's incredible story,
And at a time when half the business is still shut.
Sure. So how did it affect, so the pandemic, we're in the pandemic, how did it then sort of...
So for the year, so obviously for the lockdown periods, we were significantly, probably as a business, 45% down on what we should be doing. But then when we reopened, Cornwall was so busy, people couldn't go abroad, staycation. The first year was the eat out to help out. So when it wasn't lockdowns, business absolutely boomed. So net effect after the year of, I think it was 7 months of the 12 were closed, we actually grew revenue by maybe £500,000.
Wow.
So we were sort of 10 million or 10 and a half to just over 11, I think it was. Then came the next year where Cornwall was unprecedented volume of people. People were Airbnb in their houses.
Did you feel that?
Yeah.
You felt it through, obviously, the media, but actually physically seeing people.
Yeah, it was another level. And we'd also changed our business model on site, because previously we were a free entry, limited access, but then you could buy a guided tour. And we always used to get, when it rained, and they couldn't go to the beach, when it rained, they would come to us and it'd be bedlam. And we'd get to the end of the day, we'd say, "Oh, well done, guys, our busy day, And then, what's the forecast for tomorrow?" And we were like, we just couldn't do that with the pandemic. So, because we had limited capacity on site, and we had to control the queues. Yeah. So we
2 meters and all that.
Yeah, exactly. And we came to the conclusion, the only way we can do that is by flipping the model. So opening everything up, but charging everybody to come in.
Okay.
So going an admission model. Not rocket science, but you had to pre-book your admission online. So actually, you can't come at 10:30 because that slot's already taken. So, and what an impact that made.
Really?
Instead of everybody arriving at 10:30, everybody arrived, but they were still arriving at 4.
So staggered.
So you had a flow all through the day, and it was operationally, it was so much better. It's both for the staff, but also for the customers. There wasn't just this ridiculous queue everywhere.
Have you kept that model?
Well, it's really interesting. So we had that year one. We kept it for year two, and year two was this huge bumper season in Cornwall. Everything was busy, and so the net effect of that was, I think we grew something like 50% in that year, so up to the 16 million, which was a big growth. And that was across the board. That was external sales, that was pubs reopening, that was supermarkets didn't reduce in sales, which was not what we expected to happen. And it was the on-site charge, what we thought was charging model, together with huge footfall. So all of that combined to an exceptional year. Now we're in a very different world. People can go abroad again. There's, a cost of living crisis that it's everyone is saying it every day, but the genuine reality of it is going to be a crisis.
Yep.
So I think you have to, and we're good at doing this, you have to listen to that and you have to react to that, and you can't just bury your head in the sand. So we're actually looking at a bit of a hybrid model now of, so if we were free entry, limited access before, now we're, the opposite polar. Is there a middle ground where we can use a bit of technology on site, where we can kind of allow access to self-guided areas?
Sorry to interject, but my brain is thinking, as a board, is that talked about in the board meetings in order to second guess or plan for? Or does that come from the managing director who says, look, I've got this feeling, so I'm going to put this. How does that work?
Yeah. So with us, in honesty, that's coming from, well, I'd say it's coming from me. It's not coming from me. It's coming from our customers and our feedback.
Yep.
And it's listening to that, and it's nothing's ever final. Stuff can always change.
Yes.
So actually, just listen and adapt and tweak and trial. And we're big believers in dipping our toes. So if there's a hunch, we'll try it.
Test it.
Just try it for a week. Put member staff there and control that zone. And and the pushback I get from the team is, but my wages. I said, look, these are the sort of costs that actually we're willing to accept, because actually it may lead to investment in capex, which we want to just be certain of that. So a lot of it's so nimble at the moment. It's changing on a daily basis.
Really?
Daily basis, on a monthly basis, probably.
Probably feels like a daily basis to the.
Yeah, I mean, the last 3 years, we've gone from a business which has been so predictable, and I used to take pride in being like within 2% of the annual budget, in terms of your gut feel at the start of the year. I mean, now we're going through a process of rebudgeting every sort of 4 or 5 months,
wow.
For the year that you're currently in. So it's a fluid thing. And don't forget, the board it's probably slightly different with us because it's still very much a family business.
Yes.
So, I catch up with Dad most days over coffee.
Sure. And you'll talk about the business.
Yeah, and it's kind of all we talk about.
I'd like to talk about, just because of time, team members, engagement, recruitment, mainly retention. Do you measure quite to the nth degree retention rates at the business? Can you tell us how you do that and what impact that has on the business?
So it's really interesting. So I've spent a lot of time, we as a business have spent a lot of time trying to get the right structure, the right people operating at the right levels. I'm trying to only work with my team, not kind of doing that tendency of just going straight to the guy, because that's probably going to be quicker. So we've put a lot of effort into that, and it's really interesting. You look at across our SMT now, we've got parts of the team really, really operating well, and they're the people that are the right people for that job. That's their passion. That is just, there's this one girl who, she applied. We were advertising for an HR role at the time, and she applied, and I sort of looked through her cover letter and her CV, and I just thought, no, this isn't you. Your hospitality. Like, she started with, service and smile and all this stuff. And at the time, our hospitality manager was pregnant, and so inevitably there's going to be a mat leave cover required. So I said, look, come in for a coffee and we'll chat about this. And you could tell within 2 seconds that she was just born to look after people, and that's just where her passion lies. So she then didn't get the HR role, but we got her into the mat leave role, and since then she's evolved and become our head of hospitality, and it's absolutely brilliant. And her team, she motivates, she leads, she manages, she reviews, she trains, she does all of the stuff that in effect really they should be doing, and retention levels are excellent. Same in the girl I was saying about the head of sales. She's just got a natural ability. She knows it inside out. She's been there. She's done it all herself. She's got a natural ability to kind of find the right people, get them doing the right things, and again, retention levels are excellent.
Which is unheard of
across sales.
Across most businesses generally. People are at 30-40% retention, which is appalling. They're calling it the Great Resignation, aren't they?
Come across the other side of the business.
Okay.
And we kind of balance the books a bit.
Okay.
And it's interesting as to why that is. And it is also interesting. So, I've been reflecting personally myself, because it's quite a big role now. And my skill and my passion is probably here.
Okay.
Yeah. And whilst, it's not the necessary evil, it's completely important. And without that, you don't function.
No.
But I don't have as much knowledge and as much skill there. So
it's outside your comfort zone in a way.
Yeah. And I don't feel like I've quite got the credibility to really kind of, question or so in effect, it's over to you guys. So the step we're now taking is actually to in effect bolster that side of the business. So we're now recruiting a more senior role as a sort of head of operations, but very senior, very expensive, very experienced. We've got a really interesting guy whose passion is, we call it running the sausage factory, and we don't mean that derogatory in any way, but it's doing that day to day, making sure we're getting consistent throughput to the required speeds with the right man levels, with the right downtime, with the right maintenance plan. All of that stuff is his passion. So, as that now evolves, we're looking to actually potentially do a bit more of a structural shift and actually more splitting the business a bit more. So you've got the hospitality side of the business, which includes the sort of new pubs that we've got and the various other off-site stuff we've got. Then you've got the manufacturing part of the business. And actually it also gives these guys some progression opportunity to really own their side of the business, and actually it'll almost be separate businesses, separate
managing director, you become chairman type of thing.
Yeah. So, but the churn, and I do think there is an element of industry in there as well. And speaking to our new chap, the turnover rates that we're experiencing in production operations is not unique. To your point, people are experiencing this great resignation, but like the likes of skilled engineers and the wage inflation that we're currently facing in those areas is astronomical.
Wow.
And to the level it's not sustainable. So, and I think the wage inflation combined with other normal inflation, the next 6 months I think is going to be pivotal to the sort of overall unemployment. And, at the moment it's still very much an employee market. But it'll be interesting when the tipping point comes, when actually people start viewing job security as more important than an extra $5,000 over there.
Sure.
We're almost sort of waiting for that moment to come, because we're not quite there yet, but I don't think we're far off it. And I think that would be really interesting. And I remember, we've not experienced this level of inflation and interest rates before, but Dad has, and my, other colleagues, parents, and so they all talk to us. And a friend runs dairy, and he said his dad said, "Don't worry, Frank, in 6 years' time it'll be the opposite, and it will be an employer's market." And we were sort of saying, 6 years? That's a long time. But it's I do think it's going to be sharper and shorter and potentially more painful this time. It's worrying times for business at the moment.
Really interesting. So we're now coming to the point where, is there anything that you've not talked about? Is there any new product? Is there anything that's looking on the horizon that you'd like to get out there? Is there anything you want to talk about? If not, it's not a problem. I just end it. So is there anything that...
I mean nothing particular. We're the kind of business that will always be bringing out new stuff. We'll always be trying new ways of doing things. We'll always be investing. We're hoping our renewable plan, so that's the benefit of the cost of living and the energy crisis, is actually it brings forward those investments. So we're hoping to spend 2 million on a combination of wind, solar, anaerobic digestion to go off grid. Take control of your own destiny, which is an exciting project, and hopefully in 12 months' time we'll have achieved that, and that'll have a massive impact on our carbon footprint and all the benefits that go with that. But also it mitigates this really scary energy situation that we're all in.
There's a podcast just there, isn't there? There's a podcast to talk about all of that, because that is, you could deep dive into that, talk about the future and the planning. It's been really fascinating. I'm so pleased that you came in today. And
well, thank you.
Thank you, and it's been wonderful. As you just heard, guys, another fascinating interview with a business owner in these testing times. Until next time.